Hi everyone, I have something a little bit different that I wanted to show you today. I created this photo installation backdrop for a special event here on the farm, as well as in tandem with Canadian Flowers Week. And I thought it would be fun based on some of the questions that I've been getting off of my Instagram. I didn't actually make this one for YouTube, so I did not film me putting it together, but I thought it would be fun to go through it as I deconstruct it now, as I take it apart, because a lot of times I think when we're seeing a finished design of a really cool floral piece, it can be rather mysterious just to try to figure out how it was put together. It can look rather magical, and that is kind of the goal. We want to be creating something that is wow factor, but we want to be hiding just how it was put together. I think this piece is a really great example of some really practical ways of setting something like this up, and just a really great example of how florists are actually using really practical solutions and not so magical mechanics behind the finished product. So the mechanics that I like to focus on and the materials I like to use on my farm are as compostable as possible. So in keeping with that, this is a 100% foam-free design. There's no floral foam. So we're looking at alternative ways of creating things when we don't have the use of floral foam to hold things steady and to hydrate flowers. This design uses a few recyclable materials like glass jars. So let's dig into this now. I've got my wheelbarrow here because I do need to toss some of these flowers away. This design, I think, has been going now for about 5 days, so it is time to get rid of some of it, and some of it I'll be able to reuse for some other floral work. I'm not 100% sure where exactly to start here because I do want to make this make sense to you and give you an idea of the order in which it got put together. So the last ingredient that went on here were these Amaranthus. So why don't I start with my very last ingredient that finished this design and helped to create the line that helps this eye to move all the way through the design as well as all the way upward. This ingredient ended up being very crucial for this design, especially because it allowed me to get height when my very practical and recycled mechanics couldn't allow the height that I really needed with the rest of the florals. So how this Amaranthus is in here is I have 3 pieces, and by the way, this is green tails Amaranthus. I have 3 pieces in the upper portion of these branches, and they are literally just suspended. They're just worked through and they're just sort of hanging out here, using the structure of these branches to help to hold and support them. I am just going to pull this one out so you can see. What I did is I just worked it through the branch and I tucked the end of the stem in behind this branch as well, so that you couldn't really see it if you were viewing the piece from the front. Now it looks a little wilty. That is because I actually free stemmed these. Free stemming means that a floral cut is just placed into an installation or some sort of design without a water source. I wouldn't normally do that with Amaranthus because, as you can see, they do get a little stressed. They do get a little wilty, especially in the leaves. Obviously, it wouldn't matter if I just wanted the floral part. If the floral part was all I was using, it wouldn't really have needed a water source. We have had abysmal weather the last few days, so I was able to get away with free stemming just because it has been raining like crazy, and this installation has been sitting outside and getting a fresh dose of rain every night. So just for the daytime parts when I've had it sitting out for my event, and then I also had it out for my customers to enjoy at one point, I would just pull this stem out of water and hang it up just for that, 8-hour period, and it did just fine. These pieces did fine. But in the event that it's hot or that it's a longer event, or, depending on the situation, it's very easy also to just include a water pick. So in this case, I could have just had these water picked. And also, if it's if you're having a wide stem like this and your pick doesn't want to latch on really well, one way to deal with that is to wrap some sisal or some sort of material like cotton batting or something in there that somewhat absorbs the water. It will help just to fasten that stem into the little container so that it doesn't just fall out, and then you don't need those rubber caps that normally go on these stems. Like I said, I have 3 pieces. It's all I really needed was these 3 pieces of Amaranthus just in the top portion of this design, just to finish off that design and carry the eye up. So I'm going to save these because these are actually also very lovely as a dried material to work with for wreaths, and they're in great shape still. So I'm actually going to be saving these and be able to repurpose these for further design work. So while my helper is standing back there, and by the way, it's my son. Hello, son. While he's standing back there, just so you can see, this is the effect of having that extra piece of Amaranthus. Without it, I just felt that I was just missing something up in the upper portion here, and the design was very disjointed. So just having those ones up there, now you can see basically, now that I've taken them off, the difference. Anyways, that's the Amaranthus. So we'll continue pulling that out. As I mentioned, that was my last ingredient that really went in here. So what I had going on in here, how these rest of these guys are sitting, is they're actually all sitting just in canning jars and recycled peanut butter jars, like not fancy at all. They're just sitting in jars of water. So once I pull a few of these out, I can kind of show you exactly where I had those. You can just get a better idea. So you can see here, what I have here is I actually have a jar sitting quite high up. This is sitting above the design. So it's the base of our design is here. I have jars in the bottom of this wooden box. I also have a jar sitting higher up. It's propped up here just to help give me my height, to help me get the height that I needed up in this area. These jars, I didn't even fasten them in because with the structure of the branches here at the bottom, these jars were really stable. I just sort of wedged them in, and then by the time I weaved all these stems down, the design held itself together. We'll keep getting these guys out here. So again, I've got a jar for the height on this sort of mid height here. I have a jar again sitting up higher up in this design. All right, I've pulled out most of the Amaranthus. The lower parts of Amaranthus, like the ones you can see here, they would have not gone in quite at the very end. They would have been near the end, but I would have been adding some of the focal feature bits over top of them just to keep my design coming outward and giving it more dimension. We are really dodging the rain, hey, today with this filming, and it's not working out well. So before I go further, I have about 16, maybe 17 stems of Amaranthus, if you're curious, in total in the design. Next, I'm going to pull out this lovely garden phlox. This is an annual phlox. It's from a mixture, and I actually just grew it for my own personal garden, and it's been so glorious this year. I keep calling it my accidental phlox because I didn't intend, but I've been enjoying all the different shades. It's been really glorious. So I've actually got it in 2 different colors here. I've got this more vibrant fuchsia magenta purple, as well as this sort of vintagey softer purple here. So I'm just going to try to pull some of that out. So that's was kind of ended up being a crucial filler just to help connect the other pieces in this one. And the 2 colors were really necessary to help bridge some of my other tones between the bright reds that I had, the dark burgundies that I had, and going into the soft lavenders and the soft pinks. So let's see how many stems we've got of this. 2, 4, 6, 8. There's another one here. That's 9. So probably about 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 nice stems of phlox, 13 or 14. These might actually just have to go in the house. These are still pretty. Another ingredient in here is this wonderful, lovely bee balm, monarda. I love this plant. You can see it's starting to get a little mildewy now late in the season, but this one works for me as just a foliage early in the season, and it works when there's buds. It works now when we have basically a very late flower. It's basically bulletproof. So even at this stage, it's a funky filler, brings some color, brought some foliage for me, and it lasts a long time even at this late stage as it's going to seed. And even the seed heads are gorgeous. So just a really cool flower to have in the arsenal. A little bit of a strong spicy smell perhaps. That one I put in very much for the added texture. So you can see now as I'm taking it out, we're losing some interest and detail in this piece. So it really brought a lot of texture and movement. And that was just maybe 4 or 5 stems. Very few were needed. The key focal flower for me was the dahlia. As you can see, I have 4 different types of dahlias in here. This is Edinburgh, very sad old bloom. I love ball dahlias because they're so bulletproof. They last so much longer in a vase. But for an event type piece, some of these fancier dahlias are also appropriate because we're not actually needing them to last a really long time. So these dahlias were basically set in first with the soft snow hosanna to match the lavender snapdragons that you see woven through here. And then I created some focal clusters with the reds, mostly with these bright reds, and then as well as some darker reds just to add a little bit more interest. And there's a few of these purple Edinburghs mixed in. But I really, if you look at what I did, I really clustered my colors. I really color grouped my colors to create those focal points. Otherwise, we can end up with just a messy look with a confused eye that doesn't know where to look. So the reds were really focused in these 2 areas, as well as a few hints of red on the exterior just to help extend the eye out throughout the design. There are also some tucked in behind the design to help carry the eye through the transparent parts of the design as well. So once I get these dahlias kind of out of our way, that will be a lot easier for me to show you just exactly what is going on here behind these dahlias for the actual background mechanics here and the water source and how I made this work. Some more amaranthus now that I can pull out. It's a really great ingredient to create movement through the base of a design. So not only did I carry it up high, but it's maybe obvious, but also worth stating that I allowed it to continue on downward to do its natural draping action. Probably roughly about 30 dahlias total in this design. All right, so I've got all my floral ingredients out now except for these lavender snapdragons. These are Potomacs, by the way, and I actually needed to cut them back. They've been going kind of wonky in the greenhouse and lots of old blooms. So they were perfect for what I needed for this design. A lot of this design were actually just deadhead, which is what influenced the color palette. So needing to cut back my dahlias, and I had all these flowers coming out, and I thought I'm going to use these for something as well. So just a quick pit stop here before they actually headed to the compost. So you can see here these wonky stems. they're just going crazy. So I wanted to cut them back so that I can force a flush of growth, hopefully for one more blooming period yet this year. So this Potomac snap is the very first floral ingredient that went into this design. And they were so wonky, they were actually kind of perfect for this to create just a wild effect. I really didn't need them to be grower quality and nice and straight because I was just weaving them through. And you can start to see here now this branch structure that's weaving, that's sort of creating spaces in this design. It created for me the mechanic that I needed to hold up all of these other stems so that I didn't actually need a really firm vase basis or some sort of chicken wire or anything like that in the base of this. And that is just because I was able to have a simple water source in the bottom and just weave all my stems through, starting with my foliage, just through all these branches. So I'll pull these snapdragons out. There's another bee balm, because then we can really look at the foliage bits that started this whole thing. You might be a little surprised what kind of foliages that I actually ended up using for this. I've been experimenting a bit. Let's just count these snaps for a second here so we kind of know. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18. And I had such silly stems of these that I used these snaps throughout the design, from as much height as I could get with them all the way down to create the basis for the rest of my florals. So we had about 22 snapdragons, maybe 24, so a couple dozen snapdragons in this guy, and they are tired. Compost with those. All right, this stem came out with the last snap. So this is a greenery, a foliage that I've been experimenting with this year, and it has been doing amazing for me. And it grows like crazy, and I have no pest issues with it. So it's super low maintenance, grows really well. So there's tons of abundance, long stems. This is tomatillo or tomatillo. I don't actually know how you say that. So here's a few with the fruits, which is the reason I grew them. I wanted to see if I could use these little fruits for fun designs. I did not realize that I would end up utilizing it in my market bouquets, in my arrangements. The foliage is awesome, and it's not as smelly as like a standard tomato foliage. So this has been a really fun surprise. So the main foliage, really to back up this whole design, is tomatillo foliage. And as I mentioned earlier, here's some branchy stems. You can see the kind of stems I was using, really branchy. And these, by the way, these darling little yellow flowers on these are actually super long lasting in the vase. So really cute addition to bouquets. So with these branches, I could just weave them through, and basically they're supported because they're soft and they have a lot of movement. They're supported. You can see how it has been woven through, and it's basically suspended, like I hung it up into this branch, so that I didn't really need anything else once I had this sort of lattice, interwoven lattice work of all this foliage. The other foliage in here is this one. I don't know if I can get this one out yet. This is tomato. And again, now I was getting the height I needed with these. So here's a really great one. It goes pretty high up into the woody stems here. And again, I could just basically hang or suspend or weave that into this, which created an interlocking, interwoven basis of stems that was really quite secure for the rest of my design, the rest of my florals that I was adding. So the tomato, not always super happy when you cut it. it tends to just wilt almost instantly, but I find if you cut it and let it sit, it will recover. And something that I tend to use if I'm making things like this, just an easy greenery. So we'll just pull all these out, and you can see how I actually started out here. Now that I've stripped everything out, by the way, I would say I have probably, like, how many stems is in this? 6, 7, 8, like 10, there's like a dozen stems there. Because I would say that I probably had anywhere around 40 stems of foliage in this. Really the crucial basis by putting the foliage in, not only to help give the structure, but also means that I can use less flowers. So always great. Foliage is always great. So here we are with our empty display now. So this is the start of this design actually. You can see I have jars here sitting here. What they're sitting on are, these are potted plants. So these are some shrubs that I had kicking around, and they're in large plastic pots. They fit perfectly inside this wood box. So that is the basis for this entire display, is these shrubs, these living shrubs. To cover this plastic edge here, I used some foraged moss, just not a lot, but just to kind of cover that. And I just relied on my florals to hide the rest of it. So there's our moss. And these jars, as I mentioned, they're just sitting on the dirt here. And because I interlocked, because I wove stems through these shrubs, I was able to just not even fasten these jars in. And that actually was a crucial step, because without the height of these jars, I really wasn't getting the height I needed in my florals, as I mentioned. So another way could have been to water pick them and hang them up in here, but I just wanted something easy and quick. So this worked really well. It's all about finding the easy way with flowers. It's always about an effective but minimal on time type of solution that works, but it doesn't have to be fancy, and it should be effective for your time and not silly amount of work. So the rest of the florals, besides the few that were sitting up high, the rest are just in jars of water. And so there was just jars placed around these pots. So I have 2 on the outside, 4 here in the middle section, another 4, and then I just had 2 more on the outside here. And so when I was designing the placements of the flowers, obviously I was using long stems so that I could extend the flowers past these jars to cover the rest of my design. But if you think back to the focal areas of the finished design with the red areas, for example, and with where the dahlias were, a lot of the emphasis and the bulk of the florals was really in these 2 sections and on the end. So that is why, it is partly just because that is where my water sources were. So that is everything. And then these are just like, I mean, peanut butter. Like, these are just recycled jars. There's some canning jars in here. I didn't have enough recycled jars, so I snuck some of my own canning jars out as well. And then the wood box, which we had kicking around. We've had it for a while. I think you might have seen, I had my alliums in there for the spring, and it was empty, and I wanted something beautiful in there. And we were having a private party event here, and so I made this thing. These shrubs are hascat berries. I thought about I also have a bunch of potted lilacs, which also could have worked and would also have given sort of a small leaf texture, but I just really liked the smaller leaf on these, the shape of the branches, the uprightness of them. And this structure here ended up being completely crucial for this design. So that is this design, and that is how this all went together. So I just wanted to show you this because I think that sometimes floristry is somewhat unattainable in the sense that it's really unclear sometimes how people are making things. And sometimes I think people think that there's a very specific one way to do something. And in my time working in flower shops, particularly, I learned that being a florist is very much a job of creative problem solving, thinking outside the box, and finding solutions every day for what you need something to do, how you need something to look. And so I just want to encourage you that if you have sometimes felt like, oh, I can't do this because I don't know the right way to do it, floristry, so much of having a designer career and having a floral career and business is actually in figuring it out as you go and trying things, experimenting with things, exploring creativity with flowers, and thinking outside the box. And so there really isn't one right way to do things in floral design. There's often more than one way to achieve something as well. So just keep that in mind. I hope that's encouraging for you. I hope that this was interesting for you as well. I know it's not a bouquet, but besides making, market bouquets and gift bouquets, I love exploring larger creative work like this. I love stretching my own self as a designer. I've never made anything quite like this before. And so it's just really a great example of how in flowers we just try things out and try to be creative and come up with solutions on our feet and often on the fly. So hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions that have come from this. Let me know if you have any other ideas of how to do things like this. I love to hear from you, especially if you're exploring sustainable and alternative mechanics the way I am. I always love to hear, and I love learning together. I thank you for being here with me on this channel, and I hope you have a great day. I will see you next time.